A structure built 5,000 years ago rivals modern engineering in its celestial alignment. The world's oldest temples hold a secret language of geometry we are just learning to read. By the end of this journey, your understanding of human history will be fundamentally reshaped. How did ancient builders without writing or modern tools encode such sophisticated mathematical truths into stone? And why did cultures across the globe use the same hidden blueprints? What does this lost chapter of ingenuity tell you about the true capabilities of our deepest ancestors? This profound change in human life is known as the Neolithic Revolution. For the first time, people began to settle down, planting crops and domesticating animals. This shift from a nomadic existence to a settled, agricultural life created something entirely new: the permanent community. With a stable food supply, populations grew, and for the first time in human history, there was a surplus. Not everyone had to spend every waking moment finding the next meal. This surplus of resources, both in food and in human labor, was the essential fuel for a new kind of ambition. It allowed for the emergence of specialists, individuals who were not farmers or herders but builders, planners, and thinkers. These communities began to pool their efforts and their vision, embarking on projects that would take generations to complete. The very first monumental structures were not palaces or forts, but temples. These sites were far more than simple places of worship. They became the central nervous system of the community, a place for gathering, for trade, for storing collective knowledge, and for looking up at the heavens. The construction of such a temple was an act of incredible social cohesion. It required a shared, long-term goal and a method for passing incredibly precise knowledge from one generation to the next, long before the written word could record it. This foundational era, where society itself was being reinvented, set the stage for a silent revolution in thought. It was within this crucible of cooperation and surplus that humanity first began to encode its understanding of the world into stone, using a language of shape and alignment that we are only now beginning to decipher. The circle is a shape of perfect unity, a line with no beginning and no end. Across the ancient world, from the windswept plains of Britain to the sun-baked hills of Turkey, our ancestors chose this simple, profound form to mark their most sacred ground. At places like Stonehenge and Göbekli Tepe, they raised colossal stone circles, not as random arrangements, but as deliberate acts of cosmic mirroring. This was geometry with a purpose, a way to capture the endless cycle of the sun and moon, of life and seasons in a ring of stone. Building a true circle on such a scale is a feat of immense practical knowledge. It requires a shared understanding of a fixed center point, a consistent radius, and the relationship between that radius and the encompassing circumference. Without a written formula, these builders had internalized the very principles that would later be defined as mathematics. The circle, therefore, was far more than a boundary. It was a model of the heavens, a symbolic universe created here on the solid earth. Within its embrace, the community could gather and feel connected to the grand, orderly cycles playing out in the sky above them. This universal impulse to enclose sacred space with a perfect curve provides our first crucial clue into a mind that thought not in isolated monuments, but in a language of interconnected shapes and celestial patterns. But the circle was only the beginning of their geometric language. The next principle speaks of a profound desire for order, a need to anchor these sacred spaces to the very fabric of the cosmos itself. This is the power of alignment and cardinal orientation. Across the globe, the oldest temples are not randomly placed. Their doorways, their corridors, Their very foundations are meticulously set to face the four cardinal directions, or to capture the precise rising and setting sun on the longest and shortest days of the year. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a breathtaking testament to this obsession with cosmic harmony. Though not a temple in the conventional sense, its function was deeply sacred, and its alignment is a marvel that still defies easy explanation. Its four sides are oriented to true north with an accuracy that seems almost impossible for its time. To achieve this, its builders needed more than just simple tools. They required generations of patient observation, tracking the slow dance of stars across the night sky and the subtle shifts of shadows cast by the sun. This was not a quick endeavor. It was a long-term project of collective memory, a science passed down through oral tradition and practiced skill. This intentional orientation tells us something vital about their worldview. They did not see their temples as separate from the universe, but as an integral part of its grand, orderly design. By building a structure that mirrored the heavens, they were creating a point of connection, a place where the earth and the cosmos could communicate. This foundational idea of embedding celestial order into terrestrial architecture would become the blueprint for something even more complex and mysterious, a pattern that repeats from the banks of the Nile to the islands of the Mediterranean. From the cosmic anchor of cardinal alignment emerged a new principle of profound order. The ancient builders began to mirror the world around them, not just in the sky above, but in the very ground plans of their most sacred structures. This is the rise of symmetry and bilateral balance. In places like the Maltese temples, including the magnificent Haga Kim, we see this principle carved into stone with breathtaking clarity. The layout of these temples is often a perfect mirror image, one half reflecting the other across a central axis. This was far more than a simple design preference. This symmetry was a physical representation of the dualistic forces they saw governing existence. It spoke of life and its counterpart, of the earth below and the sky above, held in a state of perfect, harmonious balance. To achieve this on such a monumental scale required a radical leap in planning. It demanded a standardized unit of measurement, a consistent rule that every builder across generations had to understand and follow. This implies the existence of a master plan, a template for perfection that was communicated and preserved without a written language. The very stones themselves had to be shaped and placed to fulfill this vision of flawless reflection. The pursuit of this perfect balance points to a world view where cosmic order was not just an idea to be contemplated, but a reality to be physically built. The temple became a machine for harmony, a place where the conflicting forces of the universe could be brought into equilibrium. This deep desire for structural balance, for a world in perfect proportion, would naturally lead the human mind toward an even more potent and dynamic shape, one that would unlock a new dimension of hidden knowledge. The stability of perfect symmetry soon gave way to a shape of dynamic strength. The triangle, and specifically the right-angled triangle, became the hidden engine of ancient architecture. This was geometry in motion, a form that channeled immense weight and spiritual aspiration toward the sky. Nowhere is this more evident than in the pyramids of Egypt. Their iconic form is a triangle rotated around a central axis, a shape engineered to endure for eternity. The pyramid's sloping sides do more than create a dramatic silhouette. They distribute the crushing weight of millions of stone blocks down and outwards, creating a monument of unparalleled stability. This was not just a tomb, it was a mountain of stone speaking the language of physics, a permanent stairway for the spirit to ascend. This same principle of the triangle was scaled down to form the fundamental building block of other sacred sites. Look at the trilithons of Stonehenge. Each one is a simple, powerful unit, two massive vertical stones supporting a single horizontal lintel. This structure is in essence a triangle with its top point flattened. The genius of this form is in its distribution of force. The weight of the lintel is channeled efficiently down through the uprights and into the earth. This allowed ancient builders to create open doorways, grand passages, and sheltered spaces that have withstood thousands of years of wind and weather. The consistent use of this shape across cultures suggests an intuitive, if not formal, grasp of the principles we now call trigonometry. They understood the relationships between angles and support, creating structures that would not merely stand but would last. The triangle, therefore, bridged two worlds. It was a profoundly practical solution to the problem of gravity, and a deeply symbolic arrow pointing from the earth to the heavens. Its inherent strength and upward thrust provided the foundational confidence to explore relationships that were not just structural, but mathematical. This exploration would lead to the discovery of a ratio so perfect, so inherently balanced, that it would become the secret heartbeat of sacred design across the ancient world. The triangle's dynamic strength was anchored by a shape of perfect earthly order. From the foundational plans of Mesopotamian ziggurats to the vast enclosures of ancient Egypt, the square provided a stable footprint for the heavens to touch the earth. This four-sided form represented the cardinal directions, the solid ground, and the very concept of a bounded, knowable world. But the ancient builders were not content to let the earth and sky remain separate. They attempted one of the most profound acts of symbolic union ever conceived, a feat of geometry and philosophy known as squaring the circle. This was the challenge of creating a circle and a square with identical areas or perimeters, a puzzle that would captivate philosophers for centuries. Yet evidence suggests this was not merely a theoretical exercise. It was a physical reality encoded into the very stones of their temples. In the layouts of certain sacred complexes, we see circular structures integrated with square courtyards, or entire foundations that seem to hold both shapes in a delicate, calculated balance. This was a deliberate architectural conversation. The circle, representing the celestial dome and the eternal cycles of the cosmos, was being brought into a precise relationship with the square, the symbol of the terrestrial world. To achieve this, the builders needed to understand the hidden relationship between a circle's diameter and its circumference. They were working with a fundamental constant of the universe, the ratio we call pi. The fact that these structures embody such a complex mathematical idea, long before it was formally defined, tells us their geometry was not just about measurement, but about meaning. They were using stone and space to solve the ultimate puzzle, the unification of heaven and earth. This silent, stone-built philosophy reveals a layer of abstract thought so advanced, it challenges our entire timeline of intellectual history. This pursuit of perfect proportion reached its most elegant expression with a single, extraordinary number. Tucked within the spiral of a galaxy and the curve of a seashell, there exists a mathematical relationship so harmonious it seems to whisper the very language of creation. This is the golden ratio, approximately 1.618. It is the proportion where a line is divided so that the smaller part is to the larger part as the larger part is to the whole. Its appearance in the natural world is uncanny, from the arrangement of sunflower seeds to the branching of trees, and remarkably, this same code of organic beauty was being carved into stone thousands of years ago. Look at the Parthenon in Athens. While its ruins make precise measurement a challenge, many scholars argue that the proportions of its facade, the relationship of its width to its height, closely approximate this golden mean. More compellingly, the layout of its inner chambers seems to follow this same divine geometry. This was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate architectural choice to create a structure that felt inherently balanced, inherently beautiful to the human eye, a building that felt as naturally right as a living organism. The same principle may be encoded in the very shape of the Great Pyramid. The ratio of its base perimeter to its original height is strikingly close to 2 times pi, yet another relationship that circles back to the golden ratio. How could builders without advanced mathematics consistently land upon this sophisticated constant? They may have discovered it through a simple yet profound act of observation. By studying the growth patterns in plants or the elegant spiral of a nautilus shell, they could have reverse-engineered this rule of aesthetic perfection. To then scale this delicate ratio up to the size of a temple required another leap of genius. They likely used ropes and stakes to create geometric constructions on the ground, physically weaving the ratio into the foundation lines before a single stone was set. This was more than a design trend. It was an attempt to build a resonance with the universe itself. By infusing their sacred spaces with the golden ratio, they were aligning human creation with a fundamental principle of natural beauty, making the temple a bridge not just to the gods but to the underlying order of life. This deep desire to map the invisible patterns of the world would eventually lead them to look beyond single structures, to see the entire landscape as a canvas for their geometric vision. The geometric patterns hidden within these ancient temples required a common language, a shared rule that every builder could understand. This brings us to a discovery that fundamentally reshapes our map of the ancient world, the concept of a standardized measurement. Researchers analyzing countless stone circles and temple sites across Europe, from the remote Scottish Isles to the sun-drenched plains of Turkey, have found a recurring number. The diameters of circles, the spacing of pillars, and the layouts of chambers all seem to be based on a single unit of length, now known as the megalithic yard. This measure, approximately 2.72 feet, appears with a consistency that defies mere chance. How could cultures separated by vast distances and centuries independently arrive at and use the exact same footstep? The presence of this common rule suggests 2 staggering possibilities. Either a shared system of knowledge was passed across the continent through some lost channel of communication, or a class of highly skilled architect priests traveled between these budding civilizations, carrying their sacred rulers with them. Establishing such a precise standard without modern technology was a feat of immense intellectual cooperation. They may have calibrated their measuring rods using the pendulum swing of a stone, or perhaps by observing the apparent movement of certain stars across the sky, tying their earthly measure to a celestial clock. This standardized unit was the practical key that unlocked their grandest geometric visions. It allowed a master planner in one region to design a complex structure, confident that builders 1,000 miles away could replicate its sacred proportions with perfect fidelity. The megalithic yard was more than a tool. It was a transmission of intent, a way to ensure that the cosmic balance encoded in one temple could be perfectly echoed in another. This invisible thread of shared measurement forces us to see the ancient world not as a collection of isolated cultures, but as a potentially interconnected network, whispering a common geometric language across the landscape. The human mind, having mastered the circle and the square, reached for a shape of even greater complexity. The pentagon, with its 5 equal sides, and the pentagram star drawn within it, represent a leap into a more esoteric realm of geometry. While not as widespread as the foundational shapes, their appearance in ancient sacred sites is a whisper of a highly advanced mathematical tradition. In many cultures, the 5-pointed star was a powerful symbol of wholeness and protection, its uninterrupted line weaving a symbol of cosmic unity. but to physically create a perfect pentagon on the ground using only simple tools was a monumental intellectual challenge. It was not a shape one could simply pace out. Constructing it required a precise, multi-step geometric ritual with a cord and stakes, a process that inherently involves the golden ratio in the relationship between its sides and diagonals. This means that by crafting a pentagon, the builders were automatically invoking that fundamental constant of natural beauty. Finding this five-fold symmetry encoded in a temple layout, or in the arrangement of smaller structures around a central one, is a clear signal. It tells us that some master planners were not just practical builders, they were geometers in the deepest sense, exploring the abstract relationships between numbers, shapes, and the cosmos. This foray into pentagonal symmetry proves their conceptual toolkit was rich and varied, capable of holding complex, irrational numbers in their mind's eye and translating them into stone. Having mapped such intricate patterns onto the Earth's surface, the next logical step was to lift these principles into the very space we inhabit, exploring the sacred geometry of the third dimension. The geometry of the ancient world was not confined to lines drawn upon the ground. It was a living, breathing architecture of space, a mastery of volume that reached for the heavens from within the Earth itself. We see this three-dimensional genius in the soaring, beehive domes of Neolithic structures and the immense corbelled arches of Mycenaean tombs. These were spaces carved from stone, not with a single keystone to lock everything in place, but through a patient, intelligent stacking. Each stone was carefully set to cantilever slightly inward, its weight and the weight of all the stones above it channeled downward through the walls. This created vast, open interiors, sheltered chambers that felt both immense and intimate. To design such a space required more than a flat plan. It demanded an intuitive yet profound understanding of forces. The builders had to visualize the invisible lines of compression and stress, how gravity would pull on every block and distribute its load through the entire structure. This was three-dimensional geometry in its most practical and sacred form. The resulting chamber was a triumph on two levels. Practically, it provided a permanent, stable enclosure for gatherings or for honoring those who had passed. Symbolically, it was a profound representation of the cosmos. Its curved, enclosing walls could embody the womb of the earth, a place of regeneration, or the dome of the sky, a celestial vault mirrored here below. This ability to manipulate space itself, to conceive of and then construct perfect forms in three dimensions, represents the absolute pinnacle of their architectural art. It was the final, physical expression of a mind that had learned to think not just in circles and squares, but in spheres and domes, projecting their sacred patterns into the very air we breathe. And this vision was not limited to single buildings. Their geometric gaze extended outward, mapping these perfect forms across the entire living landscape. The stones of the temple were only the beginning of their design. Their geometry flowed outwards, weaving the structure into the very flesh of the earth. This was the profound art of geomancy, a practice where the placement of a sacred site was a deliberate conversation with the spirit of the landscape itself. These builders chose their locations with a visionary's eye, seeking out powerful geological features. A temple might crown a mountain peak to draw it closer to the sky, or embrace a natural spring, honoring the source of life bubbling from the depths. They positioned doorways and aligned corridors to frame the rising sun on a specific day, or to point toward a distant, significant hill. This was not architecture imposed upon the land, but architecture emerging from it. It required a deep, holistic reading of the terrain, an understanding of its hidden currents and its visible power. The concept of ley lines, those hypothetical alignments connecting ancient sites across vast distances, speaks to this idea of a wider web. Whether these lines were navigational aids, spiritual pathways, or simply a modern interpretation of a common practice, their underlying principle is clear. The geometry of the temple was not confined by its foundation stones. It extended for miles, its invisible lines connecting it to other sacred points, creating a vast, continent-spanning pattern of meaning. This transforms a single monument from an isolated wonder into a single node in a gigantic, energetic circuit. To achieve this, the planners had to think in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They held the precise, small-scale geometry of the building's blueprint in their minds, while also visualizing its relationship to the sweeping curves of the horizon and the deep bones of the geology below. This deep, sacred connection to place reveals the ultimate purpose of their work. Their geometry was never a cold, technical exercise. It was a spiritual technology, a method to harness, channel, and honor the perceived life force of the Earth itself. They were building resonators for the planet's energy, creating points of concentrated power where the human and the terrestrial could meet in harmony. The sheer age of Göbekli Tepe is a story written in stone that defies our oldest narratives. In southeastern Turkey, on a windswept hill, a complex of circles was carved from the living bedrock over 11,000 years ago. This was a time before pottery, before the wheel, and long before the first cities rose in Mesopotamia. Yet here, hunter-gatherers assembled what is considered the world's first known temple. The site is a constellation of multiple circular enclosures, each one defined by a ring of immense T-shaped pillars made of limestone. The scale is staggering, with some of these monoliths weighing more than 20 tons. To quarry, move, and erect these stones required a level of social organization and shared purpose we never before attributed to people of that era. The layout of these circles reveals a mind that thought in patterns. The pillars are not placed at random. They are often arranged in pairs, set into the enclosing walls and precisely oriented towards the center of the space. This creates a powerful radial geometry, a series of stone spokes focused on a central point, as if drawing energy or attention inward. The T shape of the pillars is itself a profound geometric statement. These are not rough-hewn rocks, but carefully crafted forms with clean lines and sharp angles. Their surfaces are adorned with intricate carvings of animals, from foxes and cranes to fearsome predators, a menagerie frozen in stone. The form of the pillars is abstract, yet strangely anthropomorphic, like stylized human figures watching over the sacred ground. This was not a haphazard construction site. The precision of the carvings and the deliberate organization of the entire space point to a pre-planned design, a blueprint held in the collective memory of a people who had not yet invented writing. Göbekli Tepe stands as a monumental question mark at the very dawn of civilization. It forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the capabilities of hunter-gatherers. How did they achieve such sophisticated geometry and architectural planning? What shared belief was so powerful that it could compel them to undertake a project of this magnitude, a project that would have consumed generations? This site sets a breathtakingly high bar, proving that the language of sacred geometry is far older and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. On the sun-drenched island of Malta, a second architectural miracle rewrites the story of prehistoric engineering. The Maltese temples, including Mnajdra and Haga Kim, stand as the world's oldest freestanding stone structures, their foundations laid over 5,600 years ago. Their ground plans reveal a stunning leap in complexity. These are not simple circles or squares, but intricate cloverleaf patterns, a series of lobed chambers that curve and interconnect in graceful, elliptical forms. To construct these flowing, curved walls from colossal limestone blocks required more than just strength. It demanded a masterful, hands-on understanding of elliptical geometry. Each massive stone had to be carefully shaped and placed to maintain the continuous, sweeping curve of the wall, a task that implies the use of chord and central stakes to act as the foci, physically plotting the ellipse on the ground before a single block was set. This was geometry made permanent, a shape of dynamic harmony carved into the very landscape. But the true genius of these temples is not just in their form, but in their function. The ancient builders designed these spaces to be in constant dialogue with the sun. At Najdra, the main axis is precisely oriented so that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, a blade of sunlight slices through the entrance, traveling deep into the central court to illuminate a specific stone slab. On the summer and winter solstices, the same phenomenon occurs, but the sun's rays strike different, carefully chosen markers within the inner sanctum. This was not a vague alignment. It was a meticulously calibrated astronomical instrument built entirely of stone. The temple itself became a giant clock and calendar, its silent chambers speaking the language of the seasons. The interplay of light and shadow transformed the space, turning the abstract passage of time into a tangible, dramatic event for the entire community. This seamless fusion of solar geometry with architectural form reveals a culture that saw no separation between the sacred and the scientific. Their temple was a living machine, harnessing the light of the heavens to mark moments of celestial significance, proving that these universal principles of proportion and alignment were being applied with breathtaking sophistication in even the most remote corners of the ancient world. Deep within the lush Boyne Valley of Ireland, a great grassy mound has guarded a secret for over 5,000 years. This is Newgrange, a passage tomb constructed around 3,200 years before the Common Era. It predates even the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge, a silent, stoic elder of the ancient world. From the outside, it appears as a colossal, man-made hill, its facade elegantly retained by a wall of gleaming white quartz stones. But its true marvel lies hidden within, a geometric and astronomical puzzle engineered for a single, breathtaking moment each year. A narrow, 70-foot-long passage, built with a precise and gradual upward slope, leads deep into the heart of the mound. This is not a random tunnel. Its walls are constructed of massive, interlocking stone slabs, forming a pathway that terminates in a single, cross-shaped chamber. This entire subterranean structure is crowned by a corbelled stone roof, a masterpiece of Neolithic engineering that has remained waterproof for millennia. The architectural plan is a study in intentionality, a geometric journey from the outer world into a sacred, centralized space. But the true purpose of this carefully calibrated geometry reveals itself for just a few precious minutes at dawn on the days around the winter solstice. Above the entrance, a unique feature known as the roof box was installed, a small, window-like opening framed with stone. This was the key to the entire design. As the sun crests the horizon on the shortest day of the year, its first pale rays strike this precise opening. A thin blade of light enters the roof box and begins to travel down the long, dark passageway. It moves slowly, deliberately, penetrating the deepest recesses of the tomb until it dramatically illuminates the central chamber and the intricate spiral carvings on the back wall. For approximately 17 minutes, this inner sanctum, a place of eternal rest, is flooded with golden light. Then, just as methodically, the light recedes and the chamber returns to darkness, not to see the sun again for another full year. The achievement of this phenomenon is staggering. It required not just one brilliant architect, but generations of sustained astronomical observation. Someone had to note the exact position of the winter sunrise year after year, decade after decade, and then translate that celestial event into a fixed terrestrial design. The entire structure, from the angle of the passage to the height of the roof box, had to be calculated with incredible exactness. A miscalculation of a single degree would mean the light would never reach its target. The spirals and concentric circles carved on the stones throughout the site may be more than mere decoration. Many researchers see them as a symbolic language, a cosmology written in stone. They could represent the sun, the cycles of rebirth, or even a map of the journey between worlds. This annual event was a profound act of symbolism. By bringing the reborn sun into the realm of their ancestors, the builders created a powerful narrative of hope and continuity. They were physically demonstrating that even in the deepest darkness, light would always return. This was sacred geometry at its most poetic and powerful, a perfect fusion of celestial clockwork, architectural genius, and spiritual belief, all encoded within a single, silent mound in the Irish landscape. The pyramids of Giza stand as the ultimate expression of this ancient geometric language. Their perfection is not merely an illusion of scale. It is a mathematical certainty carved into millions of tons of stone. The Great Pyramid's base forms a near-perfect square, with its sides aligned to true north, south, east, and west with an error of less than 1/15 of a single degree. This is not just orientation, it is a form of celestial anchoring so precise it rivals what we might achieve with modern instruments. The geometry continues upward in its iconic slope. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its original height is a close approximation of 2 times pi, that fundamental constant of the circle. This means the builders encoded the relationship between a circle's circumference and its radius into the very angles of a square-based pyramid. It is a breathtaking fusion of forms, a square reaching for the sky while whispering the secret of the circle. Some researchers also see the golden ratio reflected in the proportions of its inner chambers and outer form, suggesting a conscious effort to embed this universal code of beauty into the structure. This was not random, it was a deliberate architectural symphony composed with numbers. The internal geometry is equally precise. The so-called air shafts leading from the king's chamber are not for ventilation, but are precisely angled tunnels pointing directly to specific stars that held deep significance in their celestial beliefs. One shaft aimed at the pole star, the eternal, unmoving anchor of the northern sky, while another targeted the constellation of Orion, associated with the god of rebirth. This means the entire massive structure served as a permanent, 3-dimensional astronomical observatory, locking stellar alignments into its very core. Maintaining this level of precision over a 20-year construction period, with thousands of workers and millions of stone blocks, required a relentless process of geometric verification. Master surveyors would have been constantly on site, checking angles with plumb bobs and sighting instruments, ensuring that each new course of stone perfectly followed the sacred blueprint. This was a society that had elevated geometry from a building technique to a state religion, a centralized power capable of mobilizing and applying abstract knowledge on a scale perhaps never again matched in human history. The pyramid is therefore far more than a tomb. It is a frozen snapshot of a civilization's mind, a perfect geometric thought made permanent against the desert sky. These geometric wonders were carved from the landscape using a toolkit of elegant simplicity. Without metal or modern instruments, the builders turned everyday materials into precision devices. A length of rope knotted at regular intervals became a standardized measuring tape, A wooden peg and a loop of cord were all that was needed to inscribe a perfect circle upon the earth. To ensure their foundations were perfectly level, they dug shallow trenches and filled them with water, using the unwavering surface of the water as their guide. This was geometry you could hold in your hands, a physical interaction with the principles of form and space. The creation of a perfect right angle, the cornerstone of so many temples, was achieved with a simple yet profound trick. They would take a long rope and tie 12 equally spaced knots along its length. By pegging down the rope at the first and fifth knots, then stretching it so that the section between the fifth and ninth knots was taut, and finally bringing the ninth knot to meet the first, they created a triangle with sides of 3, 4, and 5 units. This triangle, we now know, always contains a perfect right angle. This practical application of a principle later named the Pythagorean theorem shows they understood the relationship intuitively through the direct manipulation of their materials. To ensure their walls rose straight to the sky, they used a plumb bob, a weighted string that always points directly to the Earth's center, defining true verticality against the pull of gravity. For aligning structures across vast distances, they used simple sighting poles, lining them up by eye to create the long, straight baselines we still find so astonishing. Yet the most crucial tool in their arsenal was not made of wood or rope. It was the accumulated knowledge passed from one generation to the next, a living library of techniques, ratios, and celestial data held in memory and practiced by hand. A master builder did not need a written formula for the golden ratio. He knew the exact feel of the chord, the precise sight line that would produce it. This transmission of skill, refined over centuries, transformed simple tools into instruments of profound capability. The true sophistication lies not in the complexity of the device, but in the depth of the understanding applied to it. Behind every perfect stone and celestial alignment stood a mind capable of holding the cosmos in its imagination. These were not anonymous laborers, but the intellectual elite of their time, a specialized class of architect priests and astronomer mathematicians. They were the living libraries of their civilization, the keepers of sacred knowledge that fused geometry with the movements of the stars and the stories of their mythology. Their role was both spiritual and profoundly practical. They were the ones who could read the landscape, feeling the energy of a place to determine where a temple should be founded. They could translate generations of star observations into a foundation line, and they held the master plan for a structure that would take decades, sometimes even centuries, to complete. This was knowledge too powerful, too sacred to be written down for all to see. It was likely esoteric, passed carefully from a master to a chosen apprentice through a long and rigorous oral tradition. This secretive method of transmission is precisely why we find so little direct evidence of their calculations or blueprints. The knowledge was carried in their minds and expressed through their hands, whispered from one generation to the next in a sacred chain of understanding. Visualize a single figure standing at a virgin site, a bundle of knotted ropes in hand. He is not just a builder, he is a conductor of cosmic forces. He directs the clearing of the land, the digging of the foundation trenches. He oversees the quarrying of stones, knowing exactly how each block must be shaped to fulfill its role in the grand design. For the entire lifespan of the project, he is the guardian of its geometric purity, constantly checking alignments and correcting angles to ensure the final structure resonates with the intended harmony. Seeing these individuals as real, brilliant people transforms these ancient sites from anonymous monuments into personal legacies. They are the enduring work of visionary minds who chose to speak not in words, but in stone and shadow, light and alignment, leaving behind a puzzle that we are only just beginning to understand. This predictive power transformed abstract knowledge into tangible authority. By accurately forecasting the solstices and equinoxes, the priestly class could announce the optimal times for planting and harvest, guiding the very survival of their community. Their ability to anticipate a lunar eclipse or the rising of a significant star would have seemed like divine magic, a direct line to the gods. This was not a cynical manipulation, but a genuine fusion of roles. The same individual who performed sacred rituals was also the one who read the sun's path along the temple wall. Their spiritual authority was rooted in a demonstrable, scientific understanding of the cosmos. The temple itself was the instrument that made this possible. Its alignments were fixed, its geometry immutable, providing a reliable, permanent reference point against the ever-changing sky. This stone machine did not just mark time, it mastered it, turning the chaotic flow of seasons into a predictable, manageable cycle. The community's dependence on this knowledge cemented the social structure, creating a powerful feedback loop where celestial observation, geometric precision, and spiritual leadership became inextricably linked. In this light, the temple was far more than a place of prayer. It was the heart of a practical, sustainable society, a library of astronomical data, and a university for advanced thought, all contained within a single, geometrically perfect structure. This seamless blend reveals a world where seeking to understand the universe was, in itself, the highest form of reverence. These geometric shapes were a language in their own right, carved not just in grand layouts but in the intricate details of every stone. A spiral winding inward and outward in a continuous flow was likely far more than a simple decoration. It may have charted the profound journey of life, its counterpart, and the hope of renewal, mirroring the sun's own daily death and rebirth on the horizon. Nearby, a series of concentric circles, one nested inside the other, could have mapped the very structure of the universe, from the earthly realm at the center out to the distant, divine heavens, or perhaps visualized unseen waves of spiritual energy radiating from the sacred space itself. Even the dynamic zigzag, a sharp, repetitive pattern cutting across a rock face, might have captured the essential power of a lightning strike or the life-giving flow of a river. For a community that did not use a written alphabet, these motifs formed a powerful and universal visual vocabulary. They communicated complex ideas about the nature of existence, the cosmos, and humanity's place within it. The entire temple complex, therefore, becomes a kind of library. Its walls are the pages, and the carved symbols are the sentences of a profound narrative. We are only now, thousands of years later, beginning to grasp the grammar of this stone-born text. This symbolic language reveals that the geometry was never just about creating a stable building. It was about embedding the community's deepest beliefs into the very fabric of their world, making philosophy permanent and visible. This drive to encode meaning into structure points to a final, overarching question that connects every sacred site across the globe. Why did cultures with no possible contact independently arrive at the same sacred principles of circle, square, and celestial alignment? This mystery suggests a shared human intuition for a fundamental order, a hidden code written into nature itself that our ancestors felt compelled to mirror in stone. This geometric sophistication shatters the long-held image of a slow, linear climb from simple survival to complex thought. The conventional story tells us that agriculture came first, providing the surplus and stability that eventually allowed for the luxury of temples and advanced mathematics. Yet the stones of Göbekli Tepe stand in silent, monumental contradiction. Here we have a temple of breathtaking complexity, built by people who were, by all accounts, hunter-gatherers. This turns the entire timeline of human development on its head. It suggests that the drive to create, to organize on a massive scale, and to encode the cosmos in geometry may not be a product of settled farming life, but perhaps its very cause. What if the need to build and maintain such a sacred site required a more reliable food source, incentivizing the first experiments with cultivating crops and herding animals? This single site forces us to consider a radical alternative, that the human mind achieved a profound intellectual and spiritual flowering long before we had written the first word or plowed the first field. The term primitive begins to crumble when applied to the master architects who calculated solar alignments and planned structures that would last for millennia. These were not crude experiments. They represent a zenith of knowledge, a high watermark of an ancient understanding that was then lost, forgotten, and is only now being pieced back together by modern science. This is not merely an academic adjustment. It is a fundamental re-evaluation of human potential, suggesting that our deepest ancestors possessed a form of intelligence that was both intuitively geometric and deeply connected to the world around them, an intelligence we are only just relearning to see. This geometric echo across the globe presents a puzzle that cannot be easily solved. How do we explain the fact that cultures separated by oceans and millennia, with no known contact, built their sacred spaces using the same hidden rules of proportion and alignment? One compelling explanation suggests a shared inheritance from a much older, now vanished source. Proponents of this theory point to the universal use of the megalithic yard, the recurring obsession with squaring the circle, and the precise solar and stellar orientations found at sites from the Americas to Asia. They argue that this coherence is simply too perfect, too mathematically sophisticated, to be the result of independent invention. The idea is that a precursor civilization, perhaps one lost to a great cataclysm like a flood or dramatic climate shift, once possessed this advanced geometric understanding. In this view, the scattered temples we study today are not the beginnings of human ingenuity, but the fading footprints of a much earlier chapter, a common source from which all later cultures drew their inspiration. The stories of a great flood found in countless mythologies could be a cultural memory of this foundational collapse, while mainstream archaeology remains skeptical, citing a complete lack of physical evidence for such a civilization. The geometric patterns themselves are the evidence that keeps the debate alive. They force us to confront the possibility that our recorded history is only a fragment of a much longer human story. Whether the knowledge was carried across the world by ancient seafarers, emerged independently from a shared human intuition for nature's patterns, or was indeed the legacy of a forgotten teacher culture, the stones continue to ask the same profound question. What are we to make of this silent, stone-built consensus that speaks of a unified understanding of the cosmos, an understanding that appears fully formed at the very dawn of our time? The silent language of these ancient stones is finally finding its voice through the tools of our own time. We are no longer limited to measuring tapes and the naked eye. A technological renaissance is sweeping through archaeology, armed with non-invasive scanners and digital eyes that can see through solid ground. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy deep into the earth, mapping foundations and hidden chambers without moving a single stone. High above, drones equipped with sophisticated cameras create perfect three-dimensional models of entire sites through a process called photogrammetry, capturing every angle and contour with millimeter accuracy. And three-dimensional laser scanners perform a kind of digital magic, firing millions of laser points to record a structure's exact geometry, revealing subtle curves and alignments that are completely invisible from our human perspective. This flood of pristine data is allowing us to test long-held theories with a new kind of mathematical certainty. We can now input the exact coordinates of a temple into a planetarium software and run a simulation of the night sky as it was 5,000 years ago, verifying if a specific corridor truly aligned with a star now lost to precession. We can model the flow of sound through these stone chambers, discovering that certain frequencies and resonant tones were intentionally amplified, suggesting these spaces were designed for specific chants or rituals to create an immersive sonic environment. The stones are beginning to tell us not just what the builders saw, but what they heard and felt. This technological lens is confirming the incredible precision we long suspected, but it is also peeling back layers to reveal a sophistication that stuns the modern mind. What we once interpreted as a simple solar alignment is now seen as part of a complex calendar tracking multiple celestial bodies. A seemingly random cluster of standing stones is revealed by subsurface radar to be the center of a vast, hidden geometric pattern stretching far beyond the visible sight. We are using the pinnacle of our own science to fully appreciate the pinnacle of an ancient one, and the message coming back is clear. Their understanding was deeper, their plans more intricate, and their geometric vision more profound than we ever dared to imagine. That silent geometric language was never truly lost. It was merely waiting in the stones for future generations to rediscover its power. Centuries after the last megalith was raised, Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Euclid began to formalize these intuitive principles into a written system of mathematics. They gave names to the ratios and proofs to the relationships, but the underlying truths were the same ones the temple builders had felt in their chords and seen in the stars. This rediscovered knowledge flowed through the Renaissance, where it became the secret engine of masterpieces. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is a profound meditation on this very idea, a human figure perfectly inscribed within both a circle and a square, echoing that ancient, sacred goal of uniting the celestial and the earthly. His art and his inventions are saturated with the golden ratio, a proportion he believed revealed the very hand of the Creator in the design of the natural world. This geometric thread weaves its way forward into our modern era. The pioneering architect Le Corbusier developed an entire system of design based on the human form and the golden ratio, which he called the modular. He believed these timeless proportions were the key to creating buildings that were not just functional, but that fostered human well-being and harmony. When you look at the sweeping, graceful curves of the Sydney Opera House or the perfect geometric play of the Guggenheim Museum in New York, you are seeing the legacy of those ancient principles. The builders of Göbekli Tepe and Newgrange would likely recognize the same pursuit of balance, the same desire to create forms that feel inherently right to the human spirit. Today, this ancient wisdom is experiencing a powerful resurgence in the movement toward sustainable and sacred architecture. Modern designers are once again looking to solar alignment, not just for celestial symbolism, but for practical energy efficiency, positioning buildings to capture the low winter sun and deflect the high summer heat. They use sacred geometry to design spaces that promote tranquility and focus, from meditation centers to hospitals, understanding that the proportions of a room can directly influence our state of mind. This is the enduring testament to our ancestors' genius. The solutions they found to connect heaven and earth were not primitive superstitions. They were the discovery of a fundamental code of beauty and balance written into the universe itself. Our most advanced modern structures, in their search for meaning and harmony, are still speaking the oldest architectural language we know. This silent language of stone and alignment speaks of a connection far deeper than we once believed. From the first stone circle raised at Göbekli Tepe to the sun-pierced heart of Newgrange, a consistent and startling picture comes into focus. Our most ancient ancestors were not primitive survivors struggling toward civilization. They were profound geometers, meticulous astronomers, and true visionaries who saw the universe as an interconnected whole. They possessed a sophisticated understanding of mathematical principles that they embedded directly into the landscape, creating structures that served as both celestial clocks and sacred spaces. This was a spiritual technology, a yearning to give physical form to the universal order they observed in the heavens and felt in the world around them. These monuments do more than challenge our historical timeline. They fundamentally reshape our understanding of human potential. They stand as eternal proof that the drive to seek meaning, to measure the cosmos, and to build with intention is a core part of who we are. The next time your eye traces the perfect curve of a circle or the clean intersection of a right angle, remember the ancient power held within those forms. They are not just simple shapes, they are fragments of a lost world of knowledge, a silent language waiting for us to listen. If this journey into humanity's deepest past has sparked your curiosity, we invite you to join us for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts on these geometric wonders in the comments below.